Good afternoon and welcome. I would like to call the meeting of the Charter Review Commission to order. As you know, today is the first public hearing of the Charter Review Commission. We will now move to the approval of the minutes. Ms. Blevins, I have 3 corrections to the minutes. The first is on the second page. In the 4th full paragraph, I would ask that the word cursory be changed to comprehensive in line with the charge of this commission. On page 4 of the minutes, in the 5th full paragraph, I would ask that the word asked be inserted after Mr. Curtin. And in the following full paragraph, I would ask that you delete hearing none. Are there any other changes? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one suggested change on page 1 in the 4th full paragraph that starts with Auditor Dorian asks if the charter is silent, etc. In the second line, where it uses the language to or required to follow the Constitution and or, it has the word city. That word should be Ohio Code. I suggest that change.
Thank you. Are there any other suggested changes to the minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. The motion passes. Now we will review the commission bylaws regarding public hearings. The goal is to hear from every member of the public in a fair and orderly process. The bylaws that were previously approved by this commission provides that a person wishing to offer public comment must submit a speaker slip on the day of the hearing, no later than the time established by the time provided in the public notice for said meeting. I understand that the public notice for this meeting established that time is 3:30 p.m., and we will honor that time. The slip must list the person's name, address, organization represented, and the subject to be addressed. Public comments must adhere to the requirements of Columbus City Code 111.12, paragraph 4, which provides that speakers' subject matter will not contain obscenity, defamation, or slander, nor shall speakers conduct themselves in violation of the disorderly conduct or disturbing lawful meeting provisions of the Columbus City Code. Public comments shall be limited to 3 minutes unless waived by the co-chair presiding over the meeting. Lastly, interested persons are requested but not required to provide the secretary 6 copies of their comments along with any supporting or supplemental information prior to speaking. Are there any questions or comments from the commissioners prior to taking or inviting our first speaker to present? Hearing no discussion, I would like to ask Mr. Joe Motil to address the commission, please.
I've got copies. Who wants them?
You turn around and give them to
okay.
Joe.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Charter Review Commission. First of all, I'd like to appreciate you taking the time to represent the Commission on this important matter, and also for being here this afternoon to hear the citizens speak on our concerns. The recently published Ohio Poverty Report of February 2014 shows some very alarming statistics related to poverty in the state of Ohio and of my immediate concern, Franklin County and the city of Columbus. With a population of nearly, better put my glasses on, 1.5 million residents in Franklin County in 2012, there were 202,812, or 17.7% of the population that were considered persons of poverty. In the city of Columbus, with a population of 771,624 in 2012, 169,372, or 22.2%, were considered persons of poverty. That's equivalent to just one out of every 5 citizens of our city. I believe it's time that Columbus voters be given the opportunity to express their moral obligation and provide all those employed in the city of Columbus a minimum hourly wage of $10 per hour and a $5 per hour rate for tipped employees. Both would be annually indexed into inflation. Our city leaders and marketing experts, they've been falling all over each other for years now, trying to get the attention of the rest of the country as to how to identify Columbus. Well, let's show everyone that we are fair-minded and compassionate people and allow the voters of Columbus to enrich our hardworking citizens with respectable hourly wage. I think it's time we put people and poverty before profits. My next recommendation is to amend City Charter's nominations and elections section, specifically Section 202. The nomination of City Council members and other officers. In line 2 of this section, it reads, such petitions shall not be signed by less than 1,000 registered electors in the city. As some of you know, in order to submit 1,000 registered elector signatures, this means submitting at least a safeguard of 50% or more signatures, which we require 1,500. The 50% is commonly used standard for petition gathering due to the number of rejected signatures. I feel this excessive requirement is equivalent to that of the recent restrictions and injustice that is taking place with our voting laws. The extraordinarily high signature requirement serves as a deterrent to those citizens whose fundamental right it is to run for public office. And they may not be part of our two-party political machines that's not equipped with the resources to gather so many signatures. The exorbitant requirement is meant to maintain the status quo. In the state of Ohio, a House, Senate, or member of the state legislature is required only 50 signatures. And when elected, he or she will vote on legislation that affects 11.5 million people. In the city of Columbus, City Council member votes on legislation for the most part that affects 780,000 citizens. I believe this signature requirement should be lowered to 100. I would also like to see the portion of line 3, section 202, which reads, such petition shall contain a provision that each signer thereto thereby pledges to support and vote for the candidate or candidates whose names are therein presented for a place upon the ballot. And I'm really surprised that this language has remained in the charter for as long as it has. Who we vote for has always been, and I hope always will be, a private and confidential right. I find it hard to believe that such language is even constitutional. How can signing a petition force someone to acknowledge that they will vote for them? How do we check if that individual did in fact vote for that person whose name was on the petition? We can't. As someone who has personally gathered thousands of signatures, I can tell you many people, as I'm sure some of you are aware, will sign a candidate's petition saying, I think everyone has the right to run for office if they want to, and they sign it. I also believe that the so-called slate petitioning should be eliminated. Each candidate should be required to obtain the required number of signatures for themselves. And lastly, I recommend that Section 3307.03, the creation of the BZA, be amended to read that 5 residents live in the city of Columbus and that they be elected by the electors of Columbus. And I also feel we should eliminate the requirement that 3 members be actively engaged as an architect, building contractor, professional engineer, real estate broker, or mortgage banker. The makeup of this body should be all-inclusive. The zoning decisions that are granted by this board are comparable to the zoning decisions made by our elected members of City Council. The BZA's decisions have an everlasting impact on the development of our neighborhoods, yet there is no accountability to these board members when their decisions create an adverse effect on our quality of life. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Motto. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Motil.
Motil.
That's all right.
Thank you for the correction. No, it's okay.
Happens
Thank
all
you.
the time.
I have one of those names as well. But thank you, Mr. Motil,
Sure.
for your comments, and thank you for providing your comments. It is very helpful to follow along and to have further discussion on this by you providing it. I would ask at this time, do any of the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Motil? Yes. Representative
Thank you,
Kirk.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Motil, for your testimony. Can you enlighten the commission on what the experience has been, if you know, in other cities that have adopted living wages or minimum wages within the municipal boundaries?
You know, it's my understanding from what I hear, you know, it creates economic growth. It gives people purchasing power, even though I hate to say it's going to help increase sales tax and income tax revenues, but it also helps with your economic output, so it actually can help create jobs. It can be a job creator that has been proven. I do believe the $10 amount is reasonable. I'm not so sure I agree totally with the $15 amount per hour that's been used in, I believe it was Seattle. It's a little maybe too high, but I mean, it'd be great if that's what the people want that live there. But I think for way too long we haven't acknowledged the people that work in this city with a fair wage. There was a study done about 6 or 7 months ago, and I'm sorry I can't think of the name of the group that did it, but the 10 worst companies in the United States that have bad wages, benefits, and so forth. There's a whole list of them, and every one of them is located here in the city of Columbus. I'm not going to say those names out loud, but fast food, grocery stores, all 10 of them have a large presence here in the city of Columbus and employ thousands of people in the city. So that's really my concern about that, too.
Any other questions for Mr. Motillo? Commissioner Cabot?
I feel it's been the ones that I'm familiar with that were voted on by the people of the community, and I think that, to me, that would be the most appropriate and fair way of doing it.
That's not necessarily a distinction. Initially, legislation that still becomes a city code item and not a charter item. It's initiated by
Correct, but it can be initiated by City Council in the charter, and I do believe, I did find one of the sections in the charter where that would probably fit. Of course, City Attorney Pfeiffer could answer that question much better than I could, but it would be what I thought possibly under unlawful employment practices, the section of the city charter for that. It could be placed in there, so, I would hope that something like this could be, that our elected officials would feel that this is an important matter and to allow the citizens vote. If they want to vote on it themselves, I'd be more than happy to grant them that wish and make that law. But I think it's fair to allow the citizens to vote on it. Sure.
Any additional questions for Mr. Motillo?
Okay.
Hearing none, thank you very much for your time. I just want to be clear, I don't think we have any additional speakers at this time. Is that correct? I want to make sure I wasn't overlooking anyone. Well, since we have no additional speakers at this time, I would like to entertain a motion to recess, and we would reconvene to the public hearing portion of the meeting at 3:30 in the event that we get any other speakers, because again, that was the time published in the notice for this meeting. So any comments actually from the commissioners before I would entertain a motion to recess? Hearing none, can I hear a motion to recess? Thank you. A second? All those in favor do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We now stand in recess. Thank you. The Charter Review Commission. There are several items we need to cover and address from the previous meeting, and I would begin by asking Brian Clark if staff received any comments via the website or email regarding the work of the Charter Review Commission.
Thank you, Co-Chair Moore. We have received 7 comments either as attachments to emails or as a submission through the Charter website. Those 7 comments are from the same individual, and they all pertain to the same item, which is the composition of council. The items that have been provided to the Commission are also publicly available on his organizational website and have been previously provided to the Council. And staff stands ready to do any research that you might like into those comments.
Do any of the commissioners have any follow-up questions for Mr. Clark regarding the comments that have been received? Hearing none, we'll move to the next issue. Staff at the last meeting was asked to draft language on several issues that were discussed, and I would like to start by asking Mr. Clark to go through that language with us regarding the 200 copies of the mayor's estimate.
Thank you, Co-Chair Moore. So if you'll see the screen and also in the handouts that we provided to each commission member, Section 26 of the City of Columbus Charter refers to the mayor's estimate for the budget. I will spare you reading the entire section and go to the final section, which currently reads as follows. Upon the filing of such estimate, the council shall cause at least 200 copies thereof to be printed for distribution. Copies of the estimate shall also be furnished to the newspapers of the city and to the public library and each of its branches. I'm presenting this on behalf of Sherry Kish, who unfortunately could not be with us today. Sherry worked with internal stakeholders, including the city attorney's office, to modernize this language at the direction of the commission. The recommendation, I'll read it as it would appear if it were adopted, would state that upon the filing of such estimate, the mayor shall cause the estimate to be published as an electronic record that is easily accessible to the public. The feeling of staff was that this would provide an appropriate level of latitude and sort of room for growth and technology, and with some of the other changes that the commission is contemplating would allow us to update it periodically as necessary. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this language.
I have one question that I would like to address to Attorney Cox. The public records law, as I recall, requires that public records be provided to people in the format that they request. So my question is if the proposed language were adopted and the mayor's estimate was kept in electronic format, would the city be required to print that if a member of the public requested it in a printed format?
Chair Moore, yes, that's correct. Under public records law, we produce it in the medium that was requested by the person making the public records request. So we could keep it in electronic form. If somebody wanted a copy and wanted to pay for printing off that on paper, we would have to produce in that format.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Clark? Commissioner Tyler Lee.
Thank you. My question was the same as Co-Chair Moore's. I'm wondering if we need to have any language that talks about the printed copies being available, because the way it's written currently makes it seem as if it would only be available electronically and not in printed version. Is it necessary to reference that there?
Commissioner Lee, no, I don't think that's required, because that's a mandate under state law, public records law, that we do that. So it's by operation of law that we would be required to do that already. So that this just deals with the format in which the city is keeping it, and not the format that it would have to be produced if requested.
Well, I just want to clarify before we get too far in the discussions. I think Commissioner Tyler Lee, your point is well taken, as is yours, Attorney Cox, because we are bound by state law. But we're not making any formal actions on the proposed language today. We're just going to discuss it, consider it, and make formal recommendations and decisions on the language at a future time. So there's still time to consider that. Commissioner Dorian, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I want to pick up on Ms. Lee's comment, because I would tell you that the majority of requests for public information that we get are usually for printed matter. We're always prepared to produce and deliver what we have in electronic form, but there are still many, many folks who want a piece of paper. So I think however we want to incorporate that, we should make it clear that we should be prepared to do that.
Any other comments or questions from Mr. Clark related to that language? Commissioner Curtin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also ask the staff and my fellow commissioners to entertain the thought of adding the word permanent in that last sentence. So we would have some language to the effect of the estimate to be published as a permanent electronic record that is easily accessible to the public. And my reasoning is that most average folks don't think of electronic records as being permanent. Electronic databases can be permanent, and when it comes to the foundation documents of the city, like annual budgets, and so forth. It seems to me that ensuring that the charge is that there be a permanent record of these documents so that citizens, any member of the public, can research to their heart's content annual budgets going back umpteen years is good public policy. So in addition to Commissioner Lee's and Commissioner Dorian suggested that we entertain some language to ensure that old-fashioned published copies can be made available upon request. I think ensuring that a permanent record, that an electronic record is a permanent record would be advisable. Thank you.
Yeah. Attorney Cox, do you by chance know what the records retention schedule calls for this document?
I do not. Clerk Blevins might be able to address that. I believe it's a permanent record already. I mean, there's no objection to putting that in this language. I think electronic records are permanent, except when they're on my computer and I'm trying to find the document, but that's the records retention schedule, I think, already makes the annual reports permanent records. And she says that's correct.
If you could just take a look at the retention schedule and confirm that for us at a later date, that would be helpful, and that may, in addition to adding the language, give some comfort that this document is intended to be kept by the city in perpetuity. Thank you. Commissioner Cabot?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is kind of a generic comment, but as we wade through these and as we get comfortable with them, it seems to me that it might be a good practice for us to, before we actually vote on a proposed charter amendment, to have it in final form and available on our website for a period of time before we take the final vote. I'm just offering that as a kind of an amendment to our bylaws or anything, but just as a way for us to make sure that we don't make any missteps and the public has a chance to see the last version before we do it.
I think that suggestion is well taken. Thank you. Well, if there are no further questions for Mr. Clark on the 200 copies that are currently required of the mayor's estimate, I would ask Ms. Blevins to please give an update on the annual reports.
Thank you, Commission Co-Chair Moore and Commission members. I wanted to cover with you today annual reports in the city bulletin as well as the duties of the clerk. I think staff has provided you with draft language for your consideration for Section 11, the city clerk. That section reads, "The council shall appoint a city clerk who shall serve at the pleasure of council," period. And that would match the section that's currently in the charter and has been in the city charter for the Columbus City Treasurer, which is the other appointed city official appointed by council within the charter. So this would bring that into line with that section. Then moving on to Section 11-1, duties of the city clerk. This is the section that would relate to the annual report and that we have been discussing a bit. And I wanted to add for the Commission's reference that in the council city clerk records retention schedule, the city bulletins are listed as permanent records, and they are already listed as electronic. Also, in the annual report, in the records retention schedule for the council clerk, annual reports from city departments are also listed as a permanent record. We retain them 6 years, and then we transfer one copy to OHS, the Ohio Historical Society, and those are also listed as electronic. So those are permanent records per the schedule now, and I would think that they should remain that way. I also wanted to note for the commission that the City of Columbus does have a records commission that meets 3 times a year. The mayor is the chair of that commission. members are the city attorney, the city auditor, we have a citizen representative, and then the city clerk is the secretary to the Records Commission. So each department of the city has a records retention schedule, and those are maintained in my office. We keep an eye on them and remind them that they need to be updated periodically. But each time a department has a record that they want to dispose of, they do have to send that through the Records Commission. My staff does check it against their retention schedule to make sure that it is permissible to either dispose it or send it to Ohio Historical Society for review. They do look at all those records requests and get back with the city, with my office for basically approval to dispose or destruct records. So that's good for you to know as well. So the duties of the city clerk, section 11-1, that pretty much covers the annual report that we have been discussing, and other duties of the clerk as assigned by council. So that's a broad-reaching section. The duties of the clerk are listed throughout the charter. So this section pretty much outlines annual reports specifically, and then any and all other duties. The last section I wanted to cover with you is section 11-2, which is the city bulletin. The proposed language does give a little clarification as to what is the city bulletin, what's included in that, and we also consider, or have proposed for your consideration, the removal of the language that it be sold. The city bulletin used to be on a subscription basis, and now it has been offered free of charge on council's website since I think it was 2003 or 2004. So we are just removing that reference to sold. I can't imagine that we would ever need to go back to that. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Blevins regarding the duties of the city clerk? Commissioner Curtin?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. This may be a joint question to both Clerk Blevins and perhaps to fellow Commissioner Dorian, and that is, under current practice and procedure, if a citizen wanted to research Columbus annual reports and Columbus annual budgets going back, say, 20 years, would they be able to do that from City Hall, or would they need to go to the Ohio Historical Society or elsewhere to look at such a long period of time?
Yes, Co-Commissioner Curtin. They could research annual reports. They are available on council's website. Cheryl, how far back do they go right now? Do you know? I'm sorry? 6 years? Okay, so they're 6 years on the website, but we would have them here in City Hall, yes. So they would be able to research them here.
Madam Chair, Mr. Curtin, I think we want to be careful about this terminology, reports. There are a myriad of reports containing all sorts of different kind of data. I think Angie would probably agree, a lot of the city reports you refer to contain an awful lot of narrative and so forth. Of course, in my area of responsibility, we're basically talking about financial reports. And I can tell you immediately we could produce the last 45 years in short order. When you go beyond that, many years ago, you start to rely on such things as microfilm from many, many, many years ago, and sometimes you're referring people to library historical records. But for the last 45 to 50 years, and they would, for the most part, be in printed form, but in the last, I'm going to say, 10, 12, 15 years maybe, they would be in both electronic and printed form. But in saying all this, I'm referring to financial reports solely.
Thank you.
If I might also add, The council and the clerk's office maintain 40 years' worth of records on site in City Hall. That's largely legislation and records of such, but annual reports, I would have access to annual reports back a significant number of years electronically if they would be requested, or as Mr. Cox indicated, if they were requested in paper, I'd be able to generate them. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Clerk Blevins and Auditor Dorian. Obviously, the premise of my question is, as we contemplate moving toward a charter change that would allow annual reports, that would allow annual budgets to be kept electronically rather than print, I think we have a moral obligation to make sure we're making it easier for people to access all of these records to the extent we can, as opposed to more difficult. And we should certainly contemplate language, whether it be in charter or city ordinance, that we make these longitudinal research opportunities available in a manner people expect these days. They expect these records to be very easily accessible and over many years. So my concern would be that we not change the charter to allow electronic production and then make those copies more difficult to access for folks. So that's the premise of my question and comments, and I would hope we will be able to accomplish that goal.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Ms. Blevins on the duties of the city clerk? Hearing none, Ms. Blevins, did you already give your proposed changes or the proposed changes to the annual reports? I'm not sure if you mixed that in at the beginning or not.
Yes, the annual report would be included in the section 11-1 duties of the city clerk. Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought there were going to be proposed changes to section 231 entitled annual
My
reports.
apologies. Section 231. Yes, the correction or the suggestion for your review is that the clerk would compile the reports as the annual report of the city and shall publish such annual report by the production of an electronic record that is easily accessible to the public. So that is the manner in which we compile the annual reports now, and so that would merely bring the charter in line with what the current practice is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Blevins on the proposed language for section 231 annual reports? Yes, Commissioner Dorian?
I'm curious, Michael, do you want to add that permanent identity to that section also? If so, I would support that idea.
Thank you, Mr. Dorian. I would, that we would insert the word permanent before record or before electronic, so that it would be a permanent electronic record. And that's grammatically, that's probably better than an electronic permanent record. I would suggest that commissioners ask staff to insert the word permanent before electronic record.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorian.
And Commissioner Tyler Lee, would you also like the language submitted here that this could also be provided in a paper format, or are you comfortable with the explanation by Attorney Cox that we would, that the city would be mandated to do that by the Ohio law?
Thank you, Chair Moore. I would like the language to be inserted while it is covered by state laws. I understand the average resident may not be aware of that, and I think spelling it out would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions on annual reports? Okay, thank you, Ms. Blevins. And now back to you, Mr. Clark. You have two provisions of the charter that you will address with the commission.
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore. If it's okay with you, if I could quickly go back to Section 11, the duties of the clerk. There are two items to bring your attention to there. The first, under Section 11-1, There is new language added that states, except as otherwise provided in this charter or by ordinance of council, the city clerk shall receive on behalf of council all petitions, papers, or like documents required to be submitted to council. This is a clarification that we're recommending so that it is very clear to the average citizen if they have to file something with council, the person with whom they should file it. Sometimes people are unclear, so it might be filed with various different council offices, all the council offices, to the clerk, to the auditor. This would just add some clarity to that expectation here in the charter. And it would not be a departure from current practice if someone asked us who they should file things with.
May I ask you a follow-up question on that? Currently, then, if someone files a document in the wrong office, what happens logistically?
Well, it's typically shared with all offices. The aides are very good about sharing documents that are clearly intended for the entire council with a full listserv of the other offices, including the city clerk's office where appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for Mr. Clark on that provision, 11-1? Okay, hearing none, you can go to the other two provisions.
And
Thank
then
you.
I'd also bring your attention to Section 14 of the city clerk's duties. As we reviewed this section with the assistance of the city attorney's office, it was clear that a lot of different things were being dealt with in the same paragraph regarding council's authority to establish staff, council's authority to appoint a clerk, and council's duty and authority in relation to the appointment of staff and officers in other areas of the city besides council. So as part of the recommended cleanup of the section, everything dealing with employees would be added to currently existing Section 14. So the additions would be that council shall appoint such officers and employees of council as it deems necessary. That is not a departure from current practice. And then council shall exercise no power of appointment for officers or employees except as herein expressly provided. Again, making clear that while council establishes per the charter the number of employees in the various departments, the budgets for those departments, council does not exercise any authority for the hiring or termination of any employees or officers in the various departments or other offices of the city.
Any questions for Mr. Clark? Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. We are now at Charter Review Commission. I'll read this in full because we tried to capture as best we could the wishes of the commission in drafting this language. It's brand new to our charter, so we're happy to answer any questions or go into depth as far as our thoughts here in drafting this. So for the Charter Review Commission, a Charter Review Commission composed of 5 qualified electors of the city shall be appointed at the second regular meeting of council in the year 2021 and of each succeeding 10th year thereafter, and at any time council may, by a vote of 6 of its members, call for such a commission. The Charter Review Commission shall consist of 2 members appointed by council, 2 members appointed by the mayor, and 1 member jointly appointed by the council and the mayor, such member serving as chair of the commission. Members of the commission shall not hold any other office or employment in the government of the city and shall serve without compensation. The commission shall, in meetings open to the public, review the charter. Within 6 months after appointment, the commission shall report its findings and recommendations regarding the charter, if any, to council. Council may at its discretion submit in whole or in part any of the proposed amendments to a vote of the people in the manner provided for by this charter. Any such amendment shall be in a form as provided by council. Nothing in this section shall limit the authority of council to submit any proposed charter amendment to a vote of the people as otherwise provided for in this charter. Some of the key items that we attempted to capture here were, first of all, at the request of numerous commissioners, that we be very clear about the timeline, that it be 10 years as far as the timing for that, and take into account perhaps the 5-year census at the federal level so that we have that information to consider as the commission moves forward. And then also considering that the people will be qualified electors of the city of Columbus.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Clark regarding this proposed language? Commissioner Curtin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions, Brian. Maybe food for thought for further discussion among staff and commissioners on this provision. I think it's very well drafted, but I believe that following the decennial census, the federal government's publication schedule of that census is that usually the data from it is available at the earliest in April of the odd-numbered year. And if the council is going to be appointing this Charter Review Commission in the second regular meeting of the council in these odd-numbered years following the census, and they only have a 6-month window to get their work done, 4 months at least, well, that 6-month window will be gone before the census data is available. And it's not necessarily what should be determinative of the timetable, but if having the most updated census information about our city is an important ingredient for that charter commission and other folks trying to influence that commission, then that may raise a question about the timing in the year of appointment. Secondly, I would ask whether staff thought that there's some magic to 6 months as opposed to 4 months or 8 months or 12 months or some other number. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
To your first comment, that's well taken, and we'll certainly go back and take a look at the timing both for the appointment, whether it be the time of year or the year itself. Our goal was to provide for the appointment in a year that they would have ample time to consider the items that are coming up, and the 6 months was really based on the timetable for a commission to do a thorough job. Based on our research, 6 months seems to be sort of at the outer limit of the place where a commission is able to stay within its mission and stay on course and still do a thorough review of the charter. And then also provide council with enough time to consider any of the recommendations for the ballot that November.
Commissioner Cabot?
Yeah, just the census information is helpful, but you're also on schedule to have a potential charter election at the same time that you would have city offices on the ballot. So you might just as easily make it 2022 instead of 2021 and be on that schedule, and then you'd have it in an off-city year. Just a thought.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Mr. Clark? Commissioner Dorian?
I'd like to offer this comment, and thanks to these folks for drafting this language. I think I was the individual who indicated that I'd much prefer that all these members of this commission be electors of the city. I just want to indicate that I could accept a condition where a majority of the members must be qualified electors of the city. I only mention this to say that I'm not in concrete on this all members being electors, but I would, let's say, strongly suggest that at least the majority of them be.
Thank you for your comment. Any additional comments? Hearing none, we'll move to the last provision that we're scheduled to discuss.
Chair Moore, thank you. The final item that we have to present to you is the charter technical corrections. Again, this is a new section of the charter, so I'll read it in full. The council is granted the authority to, through ordinance adopted by unanimous vote of the entire council, incorporate administrative changes to this charter. The ordinance providing for such administrative changes shall not be passed as an emergency measure and shall be subject to the referendum as provided for in this charter. Administrative changes shall not affect the intent or purpose of any part of the charter and shall be strictly limited to the following: correcting misspellings and obvious errors of grammar, punctuation, or sentence construction, standardizing similar terms, phrases, or references, and renumbering, reordering, or resequencing any sentences, paragraphs, or sections of the Charter to improve clarity, ease of reference, and grouping of sections related in subject matter. And again, in drafting this proposal for you, we wanted to be sure that it reflected the Commission's wishes that this action be by ordinance so that ultimately the citizens of Columbus could have the final say on any changes that might be made. We also looked at various charter provisions which were shared at the previous meeting and tried to pull out some of the best language we felt that captured the types of things that would fall under the rubric of a administrative change. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I only have one small recommendation. Just for clarity, I would suggest that the term in the caption of this provision and the term used in the body would match, so either use charter administrative changes in the title of the section or change administrative changes in the body of it to technical corrections. And I actually prefer technical corrections because I think people understand that as minor housekeeping changes, and it may address some concerns that people might have that changes are being made that are substantive. So I would definitely want them to correspond, and I would suggest technical changes. Any additional questions for Mr. Clark? Commissioner Tyler Lee?
Chair Moore, just a clarifying question, Mr. Clark. Who would have the authority to initiate these kinds of changes? I know it says the council is granted the authority, but could the clerk, could another staff member of council, who would be allowed to initiate the changes that are referenced in this new language being proposed?
So as this is written, it would be initiated as any other ordinance of council would be initiated. So that would not preclude, say, the clerk being ordered by council to cooperate with the city attorney's office in conducting a review, resulting in an ordinance that came before council. But the mechanism for the change itself would be the ordinance of council.
Any additional questions for Mr. Clark? Hearing none, I think we are, no, there might be, and I apologize. No additional questions on this issue. We now have some recommendation on themes for the charter review and how best to proceed through reviewing the entire charter. Mr. Clark?
Chair Moore, so since the previous meeting, staff have reviewed the charter and made recommendations regarding the themes or buckets into which the commission may place each charter section. We provided a copy of that draft recommendation in each commission member's meeting packets today. It was also emailed out previously. Because of the current layout of the charter and the commission's charge to conduct a comprehensive review, staff recommend the following themes in order: city administration, city officials, elections, and miscellaneous. The Commission's focus so far has been on administrative issues related to city government and city officials. However, we've not limited our research and review to items in our charter. We have also reviewed common practices in other municipalities in Ohio and across the country, weighed those practices with the current and future needs of our city, and made recommendations for Commission consideration. In the coming weeks, staff will continue to research items brought forth by the Commission, city departments, city officials, and the general public. And per the direction of the Commission, staff will also review every section of the Charter as part of this process. And where we have no recommendations for change, if this meets the Commission's wishes, we'll present that fact to the Commission for its consideration at the conclusion of each of those themes or buckets. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about that recommendation.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, I have a general type question which would affect what Mr. Clark is doing, but probably would require some research by the City Attorney's Office. I'd like to say Mr. Cox and his colleagues have kept me out of jail all these years, so I trust him greatly on these things. I'm a bit confused in reading the charter as to the effective dates of charter amendments. I believe one of the sections says it'll take effect the date stated within the amendment or within the amendment, but it also speaks to those amendments that are a result of petition gathering and so forth. So my basic question is, could we in fact place a charter amendment and indicate some future date of its effectiveness? I'm thinking of a transition period, primarily in areas of financial matters where it may take a few months to actually implement the activity properly. So a basic question is, could an amendment be submitted to the voters but state a future effective date if approved by the voters? City Attorney may take that under study if he wishes. I don't expect an immediate answer.
You're very kind.
Yeah.
Attorney Cox, do you have
Thank you,
anything to
Mr.
add?
Dorian. That's something I think I'd want to think about, but I think comparing it to similarly with an ordinance, if we said the ordinance is effective immediately and shall take operation upon X date, you can do that. So there is a provision in the charter which talks about the amendments being effective upon the affirmative vote of the people or some language to that effect. And I think if the amendment itself said this change shall take effect at a date certain, I think you could do that. I'd want to think about that some more, but I think would be permissible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions on how we will proceed with reviewing the entire charter? Thank you, Mr. Clark. Anything else you'd like to add before we announce the future meeting dates? And I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
Actually, if I might ask a clarifying question to the commission, as we're taking our notes for things to go back and research and prepare for the next commission meeting, it seems that there are several points in the charter where the commission would like to see either the term permanent or some reference to the availability in paper of various records of the city. Would the commission like staff to review a general public records addition either in the charter or in the administrative code of the city, at least for your consideration?
State exactly what your question is to the commission again.
So rather than dealing with the availability of documents in various sections in the charter, have a single section of the charter that would speak to the general availability of public records.
Yes, I think that's well taken. And I'm only speaking for myself, but at least you could bring the language forward and we could look at it as a commission. Good suggestion. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I suppose, Brian, I would look for a recommendation from staff informed by the opinion of the city attorney's office as to what would be most efficient and workable from an administrative standpoint. The reason I suggested the word permanent in the two areas I did would be, I think it's pretty clear that the framers of those provisions, when calling upon these records to be published and distributed to libraries and newspapers and so forth, clearly we're thinking about a mandate that these would be permanent and available to the public. So I'm trying to stay within that spirit in the modern age. However we accomplish that, I think, is secondary, as long as we're true to the spirit of the framers, that these foundation documents shall be readily available and shall be permanent, if you will. And in the future, that's more likely an electronic database than on someone's library shelves, but the same goal is achieved, however we achieve it.
Thank you, Commissioner Curtin. With that, I would like to announce two of our future meeting dates. The next is Thursday, May 22nd, 2014, from 1 to 3 p.m. And following that is a meeting on Thursday, June 19th, 2014, from 1 to 3 p.m. And both of those meetings will be in Columbus City Hall in Conference Room 225. Are there any closing remarks from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Cabot?
So how many categories or buckets have we got, and do we have a schedule for how we're going to approach them and when they're going to come up and stuff like that?
Yes, Commissioner Cabot, great question. Staff wanted to first begin by making a recommendation of the themes that could be looked at. And now that we have the Commission's feedback on those themes, we can go back and look at the meetings that we have scheduled and begin to make recommendations for how long approximately we feel, based on what we know right now, it could take to get through each of those themes, and then can make a recommendation to the Commission regarding that.
So, Mr. Clark, I take that to mean you can have something by the next meeting?
Yes.
To address Commissioner Cabot's question?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Any additional closing remarks?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Tyler Lee?
Just in addition, if I may, it might be helpful to mention the date of the next public hearing for the listening audience that might be interested, assuming it's still the same. The earlier schedule reflects it as Thursday, June 26th.
Is that still correct? I didn't have that in front of me. Thank you, Commissioner Tyler Lee. I appreciate that.
From 5 to 7 p.m. for those who might be interested in making public comment.
Thank you very much. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn until 3:30, at which time we'll see if we have any other speakers that would like to make public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second? All in favor, state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We stand adjourned until 3:30. Thank you. Okay, I would like to reconvene the public hearing portion of the Charter Review Commission meeting. And I understand from staff there have been no additional speakers that have signed up to speak today. Is that correct? With that, if there are any final remarks before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn from the public hearing portion of the Charter Review Commission meeting? Thank you. Is there a second? All those in favor, just state so by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. We stand adjourned.